Welcome. Good to have you with us. This is Tigray Television English Program Service. I'm Lalim Techano with today's news. Here are the details. After nearly 3 decades of rapid growth, Tigray's education system has been at a standstill over the past 2 years. Novel coronavirus pandemic, followed by the deliberate and systematic destruction of schools across the state, has devastated the system. For more, Faniel Umuru reports.
Access to education had shown remarkable growth over the past 3 decades. Tigray had built 2,221 elementary schools, 271 secondary schools, and 4 universities in the past few decades, with the rapid expansion of primary education across the state sure to eradicate illiteracy. Shisha Amara, head of the Bureau of Education, says Tigray's education system has completely collapsed after being a target of deliberate and systematic destruction by allied Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. Civilian installations.
More than 2 million children would have been learning if it wasn't for the war.
Shishay also said that he believed that the deliberate destruction of schools across the state was an indicator of the genocidal intents of invading Ethiopian and Eritrean forces.
They had initially planned to wipe out the people of Tigray, but since that was not successful, they are now working on deliberately limiting Tigrayans' access to education.
Destruction of public facilities such as schools and health centers has been widely documented by human rights groups and media organizations across the world.
According to a report by Addis Standard, Amhara militia has killed 30 civilians in Horogudru zone of Abe Dongo district. Eyewitness told Addis Standard several young girls and women were abducted while 64 houses were set on fire. Another incident in January saw the killing of over 50 civilians where Amhara forces burned down an entire village in Limu district of Western Oromia. For more, Fani Olumuru reports again.
According to a report by Addis Standard, Amhara militia have killed 30 people in Horogudru zone of Abedonogo district. Eyewitnesses told Addis Standard several young girls and women were abducted, while 64 houses were set on fire. Addis Standard's report into atrocities in Oromia region by Amhara forces was also able to confirm the killing of more than 50 civilians in Limu district, where witnesses say an entire village called Fit Boko was burned down by Amhara forces. The Amhara militia reportedly killed and burned several houses, some while residents were still inside. The security situation in Oromia has remained volatile over the past months, with regional government having reported the displacement of over 100,000 persons in Gutogida district alone. These IDPs have told Addis Standard that local officials are attempting to forcibly return IDPs while the security situation in their hometown remains unstable. According to the residents, security forces and local administrators watched idly while the residents were being attacked by the Amhara militant. Amhara militia has been responsible for gruesome human rights violations over the past year of conflict, leading an ethnic cleansing campaign in western Tigray that has displaced over 1.2 million Tigrayans. Amhara militia and Fano vigilante group have continued to kill, torture, and arbitrarily arrest Tigrayans in western Tigray and other parts of Ethiopia.
Tigrayan diaspora community protested in Switzerland, Bern this week. The protesters asked the international community to call what is happening in Tigray by its name, a genocide, and said unfettered access for humanitarian supplies would be essential to avert a humanitarian catastrophe of unspeakable proportions. Abil Zagabu has more on that.
Tigrayan diaspora in Switzerland held a demonstration in Bern this week, calling for unfettered humanitarian access so aid could reach the millions in dire need of humanitarian assistance.
Stop killing civilians!
Stop killing civilians!
Stop starving 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 civilians!
Stop killing 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 civilians!
Stop starving Tigray!
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 Stop starving
Humanitarian corridor to Tigray! Humanitarian corridor to Tigray! Humanitarian corridor to Tigray! Humanitarian corridor corridor to Tigray. Humanitarian corridor to Tigray. We need justice. We need justice. We need justice. We need justice in Tigray. We need justice in Tigray.
The protesters also called upon the international community to take action to stop the genocide in Tigray, saying the world had to start calling what's unfolding in Tigray by its name, a genocide.
Stop genocide in Tigray. Stop genocide in Tigray. Stop the war crime in Tigray. Stop the war crime in Tigray. Stop the war crime in Tigray. Call it genocide. Call it genocide. Call it genocide. It is a genocide. It is a genocide. It is a genocide.
The demonstrators also urged the withdrawal of Eritrean troops and Amhara militia from yet occupied territories in Tigray and asked for accountability for gross violation of human rights committed by these troops.
Eritrean troops out of Tigray. Amhara militia 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 out of Tigray. Eritrean troops 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 out of Tigray. Stop serving.
World Food Programme announced last month that 86% of the population in Tigray is food insecure, while 4 out of 5 households are consuming an inadequate diet.
The House of People's Representatives on Monday approved 11 members to form a commission that would lead a process for national dialogue. Ethiopia's House of People's Representatives has not had a Tigrayan representative for close to 2 years now, and Ethiopian officials have rejected the possibility of any elected representative taking part in this process for national reconciliation. Our reporter Seble Worklema asks us what Ethiopians are hoping to gain from this process of negotiation. Seble Worklema reports.
On Monday, Ethiopia's House of People's Representatives appointed 11 individuals to lead the National Dialogue Commission. The Ethiopian National Dialogue Commission is tasked with facilitating an inclusive dialogue and reconciliation process that would heal wounds and help the country solve its problems. National and international bodies have been calling for a national reconciliation process since Abiy Ahmed's ascendance to power almost 4 years ago. As Ethiopia's political history is shaped by prolonged conflicts and tensions between different forces of diverse socio-economic and political ideology orientation may have insisted that a national and inclusive process would be the way to solve the crisis that has befallen the country. Lidatu Ayalew, a prominent political figure, had called for the start of the national reconciliation process just a year into Abiy Ahmed's ascendance to power.
ሌላው ብሔራዊ መግባባትና የእርቅ ጉዳይ ዋና አጀንዳ አልሆነም። ማን ነው የተጣላው እየተባለ ነው። ማን ነው የተጣላው? የሀገሪቱን መሰረታዊ የፖለቲካ ቅራኔ ለማስታረቅ አዲስ ውይይት ውስጥ ድርድር ውስጥ መገባት አለበት። ቅድም ያልኳቸውን መዋቅራዊ ችግሮች ለማስተካከል በዚህ ምክንያት አዲስ የለውጥ እንቅስቃሴ ውስጥ መገባት አለበት። የለውጥ እንቅስቃሴው በሮድ ማፕ ወይም በፍኖተ ካርታ መመራት አለበት። ከየት ተነስቶ የት እንደሚደርስ በመሃል ምን ማስፈጸም እንዳለበት ለምን ጊዜ መፈጸም እንዳለበት ማን ሊያስፈጽመው እንደሚገባ ግልጽ የሆነ አቋም የተቀመጠበት የድርድር ውጤት የሆነ ፍኖተ ካርታ ያስፈልጋል።
Inclusiveness and impartiality is at the center of any process that aims to address and heal the national issues. But Ethiopia's national dialogue process has been rife with controversies since its very start. In a conversation he had with the stream on Al Jazeera, William Davison, senior analyst for the International Crisis Group, says that the multinational nature of the country makes inclusive national dialogues essential for the country to sustain as a unified nation, and added that a national dialogue could only be fruitful if it included all relevant actors.
I think there's two basic things to understand about the national dialogue. The first is that classically these processes are for sort of chronically divided societies where you have sort of fundamental political disagreements and people need to find a way to share power. And Ethiopia is the perfect example of this. Ethiopia's different sort of political communities, ethnic groups or nations, as they call themselves, they have very different versions of Ethiopia's history, the imperial era. They have very different understandings of contemporary history under this multinational or ethnic federal system. And they have very different ideas about where we go forward. Should we try and have a more unitary or unified state, or should we have more power to the regions and to ethnic groups? And that's why you get these very contrasting viewpoints. So absolutely a national dialogue is necessary, and I think we all agree on that. The concern at the moment is that another sort of pattern in Ethiopian history has been a process of exclusion. So the people who hold power, they sort of almost monopolize power. And they don't let the other groups or political parties or whoever who are outside power, they don't really let them have a say, and then that leads to essentially some sort of violent backlash. And I think that's the sort of phase that we're in at the moment, and there are very worrying signs that the process that Adam was talking about is set to exclude some very key actors, most of all the armed groups, and they are fighting for political reasons. Essentially, and then also potentially some other mainstream political actors. So a national dialogue is needed, but the way things are unfolding at the moment, there is a concern that it's really going to be kind of ultimately woefully insufficient to address the really serious political problems the country has.
Tsadale Lama, founder of Addis Standard online magazine, says that a national dialogue process that is not preceded by a cessation of hostilities is certain to result in failure.
It's not just a concern. What is happening now with the process of formation of the national dialogue is starting from the wrong foot. Since the war broke out, actually even before the war broke out, the international community was asking the Ethiopian government for this inclusive dialogue. And there are some careful sequences that need to be followed, particularly after we went into the war. You have to silence the guns first, and it's not very clear that if this national dialogue commission that is appointed by the government, a party to the conflict itself, can be able to enforce cessation of hostilities to begin with. So it's not forming a commission that is going to, kickstart the process in the right direction. It is having cessation of hostilities and making sure that the process of formation of the commission itself involves the people that are now trapped in the war zone, who don't even know about the formation of this commission. So this is not a concern. This is a dead end from the very beginning. My disagreement with the formation of the national dialogue itself is that if the National Dialogue Commission is supposed to have the parties who are these contrasting views of the Ethiopian politics, who have then finally gone into picking guns, do not even agree with the commissioners of the National Commission. That means we do not have independent interlocutors to bring the warring factions all together, who can be trusted by all. So the question is that shouldn't these parties be part of nominating interlocutors, independent interlocutors that they all agree with, that they all trust, so that they can, start discussing. So that's what I'm saying. The commission itself is a flawed in its process, but also who are going to be elected to that. So we don't know, for example, who's representing the Tigrayan people. The National Dialogue Commission is being formed by the National Parliament today. Right. The National Parliament meets 38 seats. In its 38 seats representing 7 million Tigrayans who are not having any say on the identities, on the people of this commission. So why would the Tigrayan people, for example, trust these commissioners to start dialoguing with the government that they are at war with?
Adam,
so that's why I'm saying this commission is a flawed one.
The Ethiopian parliament has not had a representative from Tigray for close to 2 years, as the entirety of the process was conducted while the people of Tigray remain under a complete communication blackout that does not allow them to inform themselves on the process or be represented in any meaningful way. William Davison also added that priority should go to distributing humanitarian aid to reach the millions in need.
But what is the point in starting the national dialogue, which we all agree should be inclusive? Until we've got those cessation of hostilities, until the guns are silent. It seems to me that should be the first focus, and then we move to the dialogue. In terms of Emlet's points, I think these are all absolutely valid. I think some of these issues of accountability can come as part of a longer process. I think there's an absolute urgency to the humanitarian situation inside Tigray and outside. And I think the first thing really the federal government needs to do is not just focus on this national dialogue, but focus on alleviating these sort of famine conditions inside Tigray, restoring services there. And absolutely, arbitrary detentions and arrests have to stop. But this is all part of this broader package of trying to come to terms on the cessation of hostilities and create the conditions for a political process. And I have a lot of sympathy for Mnet's views that these things need to happen first.
But Ethiopia's national dialogue process has not only failed to address the crisis in Tigray. For example, Ethiopian Political Parties Joint Council, a coalition of more than 53 legally registered political parties in Ethiopia, issued a statement opposing the 42% initially proposed for the position of National Dialogue Commission members, stating the fact that some did not carry on Ethiopian passports and had previously been convicted of a crime. Not to mention that just 4 of 42% proposed for membership in the commission were women. On January, 3 opposition parties, Oromo Liberation Front, Oromo Federalist Congress, and Ogaden National Liberation Front, issued a statement saying that the process of the nomination of commissioners was impartial, was unknown, and lacked representation. Professor Merara Gudina, chairman of Oromo Federalist Congress, said that they do not believe the process was transparent and inclusive.
Allied Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have deliberately targeted public facilities, including schools, health facilities, and cultural as well as historical sites across the state. One of such sites is Martyrs Memorial in Shire, in Dasselase, where residents say Ethiopian forces demolished graves and scattered martyrs' bones after looting the facility in hope of finding weapons. Kobrom Waldebran has the details for us.
Who can be trusted.
The deliberate and systematic destruction of public facilities has been a key feature of the ongoing conflict in Tigray, with Ethiopian and Eritrean forces vandalizing and looting schools, health facilities, and cultural and historical sites across the state. One of such sites in the Shire and Dasselase Martyrs and Patriots graveyard, where residents say Ethiopian forces vandalized graves in the hopes of finding weapons and money.
They had committed multiple atrocities during their occupation last year. They demolished the graves here and took out the bones and scattered them everywhere.
As you can see, they had destroyed this place and took out the martyrs' bones in the hopes of finding money or weaponries.
We have dishonored the bones of our parents by destroying their place of rest, scattering their bones.
Associates of martyrs' children in Shira have now collected the bones and reconstructed the grave sites.
The Association of Children of Martyrs received a permit to reconstruct the graveyard from the mayor as soon as we saw the level of destruction.
We never give in. We reconstructed the grave.
We planned and have reconstructed it as it previously was before. The Ethiopian government has announced the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam has started to generate power as it has maintained an 8-month-long siege on Tigray that has discontinued all basic services including power, communication, and banking. Abraha Gabertensay has more on that.
It has been close to 8 months since the Ethiopian government has blocked Tigray off from the national power grid, and yet on Sunday, Abiy Ahmed announced that the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam had started to generate power. The late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi had laid the cornerstone to herald the start of Africa's biggest dam close to 11 years ago. In his address, Meles would tell his countrymen he believed in his nation's ability to self-finance and complete the dam.
አንድም ግድቡን አለመስራት ነው አለበለዚያም እንደምንም ወጪውን በራሳችን መሸፈን ነው
We have one of two choices: to self-finance the dam or not build it at all. I have no doubt which of these two options Ethiopians will choose. I know for sure Ethiopians would pay any sacrifice to build the dam.
ስለዚህ ፕሮጀክቱ መሰራት አለበት እንደሚል ላፍታም ያህል አልጠራጠርም።
For Meles Zenaw's government, the expansion of electricity generation was a central pillar of the national development strategy, and electricity was seen as a key input into the ultimate goal of industrialization, a necessity for structural transformation, and as a means of securing foreign exchange. In 1991, Ethiopia had 370 megawatts of installed electric power and 4% grid connectivity, one of the lowest rates in the world. In the 27 years of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front's APRDF rule, both of this increased tenfold. Currently, the country has approximately 4,500 megawatts of installed generation capacity. Approximately 90% of the installed generation capacity is from hydropower, while the remaining 8% and 2% is from wind and thermal sources. The Grand Renaissance Dam is expected to generate over 6,000 megawatts of power, more than doubling the current generation capacity of the country. Much of the generated power is intended to provide supplies for Ethiopians, and the rest is expected to be sold to neighboring countries as a way of generating foreign currency. But since Abiy Ahmed's ascendance to power, Ethiopia is known best for withholding basic services to millions of Tigrayans. In 16 months of conflict, much of Tigray has been under a complete power and communication blackout, as the Ethiopian government has actively denied Tigrayans access to banking services and taken part in the deliberate and systematic destruction of schools and medical facilities. In the past years of conflict, the Ethiopian government has not